Hey everybody, for our late May edition of Dawn Patrol, um, our recurring chat with Larry and Chris of ATG on all things wargaming naval. So let's get right into it. I liked the most recent sit rep. I have it in front of me on the desktop here, I really like the HMS Aurora article, by the way. I hope that is that kind of is that telling of what we might be able to expect in the birth of the plan product, or is this kind of like a forerunner to that research, or
Well,
how does
obviously, it came out of that, and Chang Lei has done some amazing stuff. He's talking about a part of naval history that nobody's touched, the 1940s to early 50s. So it's CAS era, but it's Taiwan, it's China, it's the U.S., it's Britain. They're all involved in the post-China situation. Birth of the PLAN is already a draft. I'm hearing another voice in here. Is there somebody else talking on the line?
No, it's just Peter's speaker is the mic's picking up his speaker. He's muted, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, as long as we're not creating as long as the sound's getting through, okay. Big pardon. No, Chang Lei has popped up with stuff. He's working on showing us parts of revolutionary China that I don't think anybody's seen over in the West. And I'm really looking forward to whatever he's working on next. He's got Birth of the PLN, and he's working on a book, believe it or not, on the Type 51 destroyer class, which I am dying to see, and will undoubtedly tell us a lot about the Chinese Navy.
Let's clarify that just a wee bit. It's the early Type 051s, the Ludas. He's not going to be doing the more recent ones because he lives in the PRC and he's got to be careful.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff he's published already, I'm surprised they haven't carried him off. But the Chinese defense community appears to be amazingly tolerant about this huge fan community that sits there on the ends of runways and takes photos of aircraft noting the serial numbers and looks for mods on aircraft in flight and discusses them freely online. It's simply the impossible to suppress. Maybe they figure they're putting out so much disinformation and noise that they're not hurting anything. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of disinformation in there. Because these guys are fanboys. Everything's always the best, the newest, supersonic, hypersonic, and whatever comes after that. But that's probably enough on that. But there's some good stuff. Once we get High Tide and the Formers books out of the way, Birth of the PLAN are waiting, and a new version of CAS are waiting in the wings as the next front burner projects. We can talk about those if you want, or if there's other questions you got, Peter.
Well, we have several questions here, and there's a few questions on Discord that we'll kind of combine towards the end. But if you want to go ahead and just describe maybe what in the plans here for High Tide, I think it would be great for us to know what's up with that first. Start with High Tide and move forward.
Okay. Well, High Tide has been around for I don't know how many years. I'd have to go look and see when the first edition of it came out. We republished it when we went from Clash of Arms to our own company, but it really hasn't been touched much since its original publication, and I will look that up and tell you when that was. We've got there's Chris doing it right now. It was our front burner project when we started, when we created the 5th edition, because we wanted, it's U.S. versus Russia. We figured it'd be an easy mod. And instead, every time we looked at it, we found more stuff that needed to be done and more stuff that needed to be updated and corrected. And Chris, what's the answer?
2003.
2003. So let's
20.
not talk about how long ago that was. Okay.
Yeah, it's over 20.
And needless to say, new information has come out, and we've gotten a lot smarter. And so it's taken us 4 years really to update it, and along the way, create the forms package, which is this book that's going to come out with it. Andy Doty's doing it for us, the Form 10s, and there will be Form 20s in there as well for the aircraft. But bottom line is, all the ships and aircraft called out by the scenarios in high tide will be in this forms book. So that makes it one of the biggest publications we've ever made. I still don't have a solid page count because Andy hasn't done all the forms yet, but it's looking to be on the order of 140 to 150 pages, which would kill many trees, but we're only going to do this as a PDF because that's the whole point of a forms book. You get it, and then you print out the forms you need.
What you're going to use, yeah.
And again, because it has all the data, sensor ranges, weapons effectiveness, everything, all the ship stats are in there. You don't need Russia's Navy, Russia's aircraft, America's Navy, America's aircraft, Commonwealth Navies, and Commonwealth aircraft in your library. So if somebody's interested in Harpoon, they can buy the rules, and they can buy High Tide, and then the forms book, and they can play a wide variety of scenarios. And by the way, once they've got the forms book, they've got a huge number of Cold War era ships and aircraft that they can play scenarios with. Now, one clarification: the stuff in the forms book shows the ships and aircraft in their configuration for those scenarios, most of which were around 1988 or 1984. So if you want the whole commit thing, then you've got to get the annex books, because that covers the entire length of the aircraft, all the time it was in service, all the mods, all the configurations.
Right, and that's one of the things I learned honestly, I had to become a new player with H5. The one thing I did learn was the sheer amount of information you get in any one of those entries is amazing, right? And it really took me digging in and having to create my own scenarios to really appreciate it. I do appreciate all the work. This leads to a good question. How well, I mean, you don't have to give me figures, but I mean, how well is Tattletail doing? I'm assuming Tattletail has done pretty well for you to kind of go this Form 10.
It's doing well. It's again, it's supposed to be an introduction. We could do more to push it as an introduction. I will be showing it off at Origins, and it's been translated into both Chinese and Japanese by Cheng Lei and Aizawa Masaya. So it's popular. I can't give you total sales figures off the top of my head, but it really fits in a good niche for us in between the Jumpstart, which is where you're watching a game being played and understanding the rules, and going on and playing what is a very simple scenario. Okay, Russian ship here, SAG here, shooting starts.
We've had an upsurge. I don't know necessarily why, but we do have an upsurge of people kind of joining the server. And one of the first things I basically tell them to do is obviously do the jump start, which is a very good scenario in and of itself. But also pretty much I tell them, go ahead and get Tattletail first, and then maybe take part in a play-by-post to get a little bit more used to the rules, and then step yourself into the annexes and so forth. You got to kind of step yourself around to where your interests lie, of course, right? But it's a very approachable product if you take your time and find what you want. Yeah. So let's go back to product. Is there anything else out in the periphery? I know Command at Sea is getting an uplift, if you will. Is that right?
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up there a little bit, Peter. I'm having trouble with the audio.
Can you hear me now?
Your mic is crackling. That's what part of the problem is. But I heard it, Larry. He wants to know where we're going with Command at Sea. The first thing to let people know, This is a new edition. So this will not be an automatic update. You're going to have to buy it again. And the reason being is because CAS 4.1 came out in 2016. And we've had a lot of updates done on the Battleship, Fear God Dreadnought, and Harpoon. All this has to be ported back into Command at Sea. And there's going to be some additional changes. I've got those multiple pages upon pages upon pages of depth charge tables, and I'm going to simplify those down because, yeah, they're great detail, but first of all, not many people play ASW scenarios. So I'm gonna throttle that back a bit so that it's easier just to display the data rather than like about 6 or 7 pages. It'll probably be 1 or 2 at most. So we're looking at that. To my chagrin, we really didn't cover combat air patrol very well. So there's going to be rules on how to do that. In particular, one of the ones that's going to come up is that if you have a cap at low and the strike comes in at medium, you get to wave, and that's all you do. And
that's on me. I mean, the altitude change was abstracted probably too far in the earlier editions of CAS. It takes a long time for a piston engine aircraft to climb, and that's not really reflected in the rules properly.
And when you look at fleet doctrine from the time frame, they have altitude stacks for cap, and they don't expect the guy down low to be able to engage, and that's a pretty big deal when you get down to it. The other thing that we don't address particularly well is fighter direction, which is a big deal in the latter part of the war. I mean, that's what a height finder was originally developed to do, so that they could direct the lower altitude cap early enough to get up there to be able to intercept. So we're going to have to come up with some simplified rules on how to deal with this, the Combat Information Center concept. And this is a question I think John Newth had a while back is, in regard to kamikazes, that directly drove the combat system concept that's in Harpoon. So we've got to put the precursor in there, and we're not going to have combat system 0. It's just going to be, if you have a CIC, you can do this. If you have a CIC and a height finder, you can do this. And one of the things we're going to have to define is, when does that become saturated? What that means is you can only react to so many contacts, because after that, you can't keep track. Remember, you're talking about guys with grease pencils on a transparent plot. That's your situational awareness. It's not, this fancy thing like Aegis or even just a humongous PPI display. So you're going to have to get into, there'll be more planning when you set up your formation for your anti-aircraft zones, because those aren't going to be automatic. If it's, if a flight's coming in, not everybody can shoot. And so we're going to solidify those rules a little bit more. And we're also going to adjust visual detection by aircraft, because right now we have, if you have cloud cover, you roll a dice against cloud cover, and that's percent you can see. Doesn't work with a grazing angle. Okay, if you have 50% clouds, you can't see beyond a certain range, because the clouds look like a solid layer at that point. So you're going to see some modifications on that, and we're going to push what we did in Fear God Dreadnought, in that you're going to have a low altitude search and a medium altitude search. And this was done mostly because, 1, clouds, and 2, navigation issues. Ships could only measure the low altitude winds. So all their planning was based on that meteorological data. When you got up higher, the winds are different, and that really screws up your navigation capability. So dead reckoning by the aircraft becomes problematic. and that's why you had a lot of errors. Larry tried to put some of that error issue into the last sit rep when he talked about sighting reports. And he wrote that up, which is a really good entry, because a lot of people, when they play the game, treat visual searching just like a radar. I have excellent bearing, excellent range, and I'm sorry, that's not how it works.
Very good. Is my voice coming in a little better now at all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. There was some sort of echo cancellation thing. I think that was kind of double upping. I personally really enjoy the additional Indian Navy information that we get out of that sit rep from the India intervention scenario, which we're actually running on the Discord now, by the way. I was just going to show a simplot map that Kevin Martell had done for us. Just real quick, give me a second. Just to kind of give folks kind of the area that's involved.
Peter, you're coming in very faint.
Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. This is the first time I'm doing it straight from a new laptop recently. Just kind of give folks an idea of what was involved in the India interception scenario without giving too much away at all. This is a Simplot 2 map that Kevin had done for us. A simplified map of the very nice art that is in the sit rep itself. So there's different artwork in the article. But yeah, this is actually the first time I've really even read too much about the Indian Navy and their kind of appropriation of the Cashin 2 and the modifications that they make. I've always been impressed with nations that have taken newly purchased platforms and modified them pretty significantly, right? Beyond their original scope and capabilities. So I really enjoyed. We've been enjoying playing the scenario. It's kind of like an escape from this the Gulf of Aden area, which this coincides very well with the previous. I think it was the previous sit rep had an escape from Aden scenario H5, which was also very well done. I'm loving all the sit reps, by the way. So anything from y'all about what went into this information and annexing?
The first thing I would point out is that the Cashin 2 that the Indians ordered was pretty much the Tattletail version that the Russians started putting together. That's why you've got the SSN-2C 2D launchers pointing aft on those, but on the Indians, because they're approaching, they put them forward. So they had the Russians put them forward, which it required them to do a little bit of jostling of stuff, but not horribly so. And so that reflects the fact that they're going to plow towards the contact, not run away, and send their regards as they're trying to disengage. Not many people really realize why the Russians put launchers where they did.
Okay, I'll stop sharing it. I also wanted to ask, just are there any peripheral products that are in motion right now? Are there any other annexes in motion? I know that Latin America was kind of in progress. Is that?
Yeah, haven't heard anything from Jolly lately.
We've got the world blocked out and people working away on different aspects. We got a guy in France who's working on a French scenario book, and we would support that with a France's Navy supplement. The next supplement we're going to do, by the way, for Harpoon, it's going to be Japan, which we'll have to, instead of calling it Japan's Navy, we will call it Japan's Self-Defense Force. That's already slotted in place. France might come after that. It depends. We're trying to coordinate that with Francis in France so that his supplement and France's Navy come out together. We got a guy working in Latin America. We've got a guy who's doing NATO North and NATO South, and everybody's working at their own pace. And we reward success when somebody's ready to get their stuff published. That goes into the hopper. We have no lack of that. As far as other side projects, Chris, can we talk about on Wargaming? You mentioned that.
Which one?
On Wargaming?
We have not talked about that.
And I don't know if everybody knows about Matt Caffrey, who's one of the really big thinkers on wargaming, the craft of wargaming and wargame design. He came out with a book some time back called, strangely enough, On Wargaming, which is really two very good books glued together. The first half is on the history of wargaming, which is very enlightening, and he goes all the way. Not only does he go all the way back, he goes wide. He talks about what's going on in China right now, what's going on in. I think he even covers some of the Middle Eastern countries. So that's the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is how to design a war game, written very clearly, very very useful information there if you're going to sit down and write a game on. We're not talking about how to write a tank game or how to write a naval game or how to write a game about the Battle of Austerlitz, just how to write a game in general. And he's going to do a second edition with us. Woo! And it's in draft. It's out for review. By that, I mean, he's given it to a bunch of other fairly deep thinkers, and they're looking at it and commenting. They get their comments back, and we will be publishing, I believe, the second volume first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we split it into 2 volumes, and that second volume will come out first, strangely enough. It's just the way it works. Because it keeps on tweaking the first volume. Oh, here's another thing I can update or modify. So that's. I wish I could say that what's going to be slotted for production, but until he gives us the draft, we really can't say.
That will be available as print, a print copy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that will be in a print as well as a PDF.
Okay.
We've got a lot going on. If anybody speaks Japanese or knows Japanese speakers or lives in Japan or whatever, we've got Aizawa Masaya has done a tremendous job in translating different products to Japanese. And Chris, I just got his draft of Dawn of the Battleship this morning. Translated. But
I'm sure they'll like that.
Gangbusters. And he's done Harpoon. He was Tattletail, all kinds of different products for us.
We just got CAS out, CAS 4.1.
Yeah. Which is I can't think of what other peripheral products we can talk about at this time. Do you, Chris?
Yeah, the rest of it's all the mainline stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we try very hard to support each product in our. You can't call it a quadrilogy. I don't know what you call that. Okay, we got 4 games. We try and support each one with products, and so nothing. It's still too much. The problem is, as you work, you get smarter, and we keep on having to go back and incorporate that knowledge into the rules, and it has ripple effect. For instance, because we're updating CAS, Command at Sea, to 5th edition, we're going to have to go back and update all of the Fleet Series books. Now, it won't be a huge update, but we haven't touched those books in well over 10 years, I think.
Yeah, and those won't be a new purchase because it's a minor update. It's mostly dated. So if you've bought, Super Marina and you've got Mediterranean fleets, you'll get a notice to get a new version. The only thing that may represent more time for us, more time and effort, will be flushing out the remarks a little bit more. To take into account mods done during the middle of the war. And We've had the benefit of additional data. Like I've got a book on the history of Royal Navy radar now that tells me by month and year what ship had what. It's a humongous annex. It's a Gantt chart almost in the back of the book. And it's just like, oh, well, that's nice to know.
It's incredibly useful. Yeah, and so it's amazing that something that happened that long ago, we're still finding new, better information on it. You kind of figure that, well, that's World War II. We've got it all in one package, and we can put that away and move on. No, we have to keep going back and making it better, making it more. We're removing uncertainty. We're adding more information that's useful to the players. So it's not like we're just polishing the cannonball. It's a better product after we've made these mods.
Very good. I think we have several good questions on the Discord, which I might start with, and then I'll start kind of going through the YouTube questions.
Let me finish up with a couple other things first, Peter, and then we'll go to questions.
Go for it.
The other product that's not going to be coming out this year, but we're going to start working on it, is the data annexes for the rest of the World War I navies. Now, the problem is we can't call it Second Squad, the Uninvolved, the Also Ran, or right now it's just Rest of the World. I mean, that's, they're not particularly good titles. So we're going to appeal to the imagination of the players to make recommendations on what we should call this annex. It will be World War I, Fear God Dreadnought, and it's going to be all the other navies that really didn't participate a great deal. And the winner will get a free print copy of the product when we're done. But you're looking at all the Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, Netherlands, Norway. Yes, John, when you watch this, Sweden, Denmark, U.S. and Japan in full, obviously. We'll probably include China only because Chang Lei would push it later on anyway, so we might as well throw it in. Spain, probably not Portugal. She doesn't have much. The ABC countries, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, will go in there. And then those will be tacked through onto a supplement called Gathering Storms right now. I don't know if that's going to be the final title. And that's going to be about 25, 30 scenarios. All of them are what ifs and hypothetical, but there was a lot of tension rising up, in the 1907, 1908 to 1914. And so there are going to be scenarios on that that will leverage considerably off of the rest of the world Fear God Dreadnought annexes. So that has been starting to move. We hope to have an idea of the number of scenarios and what countries by Historicon. So we should have a really good idea by that time of what we're looking at in terms of effort. And then the last thing is Harpoon Captains Edition. While Larry is working on CAS, I'm going to be fleshing out the big design aspects of that one. The thing you can count on is it will be counters or miniatures, hexes or not. The turns are going to be 8 hours. The hexes, if you use it, are going to be 50 miles. Because that's pretty much, you put a ship in the center, that's pretty much radar coverage. The combat systems will be really simplified. I mean, hideously simplified.
We probably won't even use the term.
Yeah, well, yeah. And because we don't have to worry about detection or fire control. In 8 hours, it happens. So all we end up doing is saying, you get X number of shots, and we're done. And then all the detection is going to be largely cookie cutter, except for sonar. And what's going to happen is we're going to be using a D20 system, so that your modifiers are a 5% modification at the very least. Anything smaller than that, we don't care. That's a secondary order. Sorry, we're not going to care. So we're looking at those. the specific thing I'm trying to make, Peter, and why I say hex is trying to be able to appeal to those who play Vassal or Tabletop Simulator. So make this available for that.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll get players porting it to both very quickly. So, and I can kind of help arrange for that.
So
I very much look forward to that. So it's sounding basically like you're starting from scratch, really learning from what worked well. The one thing we did do, Kevin Martell and several others and myself, was we introduced double blinding into the battle. So something to consider is you might not have to rulify certain things, because I think the authors of the Vassals might introduce it for you, basically. You know what I mean?
Well, that's true, but if you're playing a hex-based game, or even if you're not, the only plotting is going to be where you are. I mean, so you can take a hex map and just draw the lines, or you can say how far like wooden ships and iron men, 2 forward, 1 starboard, that sort of thing. But here's the chink: when you use hexes, the location of that contact is either in that hex or any of the 6 adjacent hexes, so that you have to assign search assets to localize. That may not, you can skip that for Tabletop Simulator and Vassal with double blind, but when you don't have that, this will force people to have to find out exactly where it is, because if you shoot, you're already starting off with a 1/7 chance of having the right spot.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah, that's an improvement over the previous, I think. That sounds very good, by the way. Yeah, and if you ever need any beta testers, I'm sure I can whip up.
I'm sure we'll be putting it available for beta testing.
Yeah,
I
awesome.
mean, only a fool publishes a game that hasn't been tested.
One of the first things I wanted to show was one question from Plebiscide on YouTube. Here, let me this up real quick. He wants to know how you would like to get those title suggestions. Like, what's the best way to get that to you?
There's a number of options. You can drop a post on Facebook, because Larry looks at that.
Oh, rarely. Okay, waving hand here. Yeah, Facebook, I check it when I can, but stuff blows by so fast that I can't, it's not 100% I'm going to see it. The best way is going to be email to ADTR group at AOL. That's our standard email. Email goes there, and we try very, very hard to answer all our email.
And
Facebook is, Admiralty Trilogy Group is where we post announcements, and we get there. I try and get there often, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to be there every day. And unfortunately, Facebook doesn't tell you all the new stuff. It just shows you what's in your current basket. It doesn't have all the stuff. Tell you about all the stuff that's already streamed by. Thank you very much. So I can't guarantee that Facebook's the best way to go. Email is going to be best.
I'm pretty sure that email is the recipient of all the group's IO posts for y'all, right?
We could set up a depository on Discord if you like, Peter.
I'd be happy to set up a room for it, and then they can get credit from that. Yeah, that's another method of it. I'd be happy to do that. I'll do that right after this. So. Yeah,
and then of course the announcement will be made here on Discord as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yep, I'll let people know. So I'm going to continue with a few of the Discord questions first, just because we had asked for them originally. This is an interesting one. Biological contacts and how to integrate marine environment. The way I've done it as a GM is I've done it by scenario, right? Like, there's just a certain percentage of biological contacts in certain areas, but any thoughts on this?
Here's the problem you run with, in that we try to avoid, because it just makes it more difficult. Mammals, okay, they make a lot of noise. It's frequency dependent. Most of them are in the MF to HF range. Total rays don't give a damn. They don't hear most of it. They hear some whales because they do have. We know some whales can transmit transoceanic, but that's pretty minor. One of the ones, fish, snapping shrimp are a real pain in the butt, and they're everywhere. So we don't really put it in. If you want to put it in, it's more of a false alarm issue, and that the referee can give a false contact. Now, the best way to do this is to have a blob that you move very slowly in your scenario that the players do not see. So that could be a school of fish or a pot of whales. And then you can pop it up to have false alarms. And of course, the closer you get to a landmass, the more blobs you have. So that is one way you could do it. And if, we go back to Mariano's book on, go find him and bring me his hat, you look at the number of actual contacts the Brits dropped ordnance on, it's frighteningly small. A lot of it was spurious contacts and biologics.
And the other thing is, Harpoon tends to model combat. And I can think of no instance that I've read about or heard about where there was a live submarine and a biologic being prosecuted at the same time. So operationally, you're going to be sailing along and you get a contact, you try to localize, you try to classify, and this is real world because I've chased them. 90% of the time, 100% of the time, a lot of the time, it's a biologic, and after a while you walk away. And of course, it's the skipper's decision, it's the formation commander's decision whether or not they walk away, whether they make damn sure it's make sure it's a biologic before they leave. But that one time that it's not. That's one of the reasons why they call ASW awfully slow warfare. Most of the time, you're chasing a whale, maybe even whale byproducts. So it's not something that happens during a fight. Now, if you wanted to have a scenario where you're chasing biologics and that slows you down as you're trying to get somewhere, that's where it might affect tactically what happens. But again, that happens almost off board. So, apologies, but we haven't figured out a way to work biologics into an actual scenario and have it be relevant, other than a frustration for the player and no value to the outcome of the scenario.
The same thing can be said for Mad Peter. If you have a scenario in shallow water, particularly area where you had a lot of wrecks, you have tons of false alarms on the MAD system because, you try and run MAD over the North Sea.
Oh, God.
And boy, howdy, there's a lot of stuff down there that will easily trigger MAD because, they're so much bigger than most submarines of the era. And I don't even want to get into what happens when we talk mine warfare because, nominal mine objects are everywhere. So all it really does is, as Larry says, it provides frustration. And it all depends on what the goal of the referee is. So
this occasionally pops in my mind too, and I think you've probably answered this occasionally throughout your careers. Have you ever thought of going earlier? Or do you feel like it's a crowded...
Breathe, Chris, breathe.
I think we've pushed back to about 1865 in the gun and torpedo realm. And we have some ships that go that far back, but we really aren't pushing much further back than about 1885, 1880 for scenarios and whatnot, because I have a hard enough time convincing people that 2,000 yards is considered long range. I mean, it's get closer, guys, get closer, and it's just, it's like I'm beating some poor peasant to pull that brick harder, because they just don't get the dramatic change in gunnery from World War I even to pre-Dreadnought.
Well, it was a shock at the time too.
I feel like it's
I could hit people that far out.
I feel like it's also a pretty well covered era.
Yeah, I think David Manley's got some really good models and some very some simplified game rules for that era. And as far as I'm concerned,
yes, I think
got it covered.
If anybody's looking for something to cover that area, look at all the Long Face Games books or the A&A engineering books, even like Iron and Fire by David Manley, which was the first naval wargame I played, by the way. Awesome game. You can also even Ironclad, the original. What was the name of that? Yukinto.
Ironclad. That's a great game.
Ironclad is by Yukinto is a great one too. I mean, there's a lot of coverage of it. I feel like it's a very well represented area, and I think it kind of diverts ATG from where it's sweet spot, I guess, which is a pretty large sweet, a century, right?
I got to tell you, Peter, having 150 years of weapon system and sensor system data is enough to make your hair curl.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So while I agree with the sentiment, I think the coverage would be interesting. I do think that you could probably modify Fear God and Dreadnought and probably come up with something that's.
Yeah, now we could do some the Banana Wars, a scenario for Latin America and gunboat diplomacy. You see a lot of that already in Monroe's Legacy.
Right, absolutely. It's a little bit, it's maybe a decade or two difference.
But I refuse to do Lissa.
Okay. It's just duly noted. All right. Let's see if there's another one. Well, this was an interesting one. Hold on. Let me bring this. Hopefully when a seaplane lands on water, can it be targeted by anti-ship missiles? Sure, if you want to waste a couple million. No, I'm just kidding.
Shoot, yes. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I would say that your odds of hitting are not great because it's relatively very small. Guns, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar situation in a game we played, early Falklands game, and some British Sea Links were coming with helos on General Belgrano, and they were at velo, so the radar couldn't see it. The gunfire radar couldn't make them out. I says, well, you got high-speed surface contacts. It's a heck of a modifier for speed, but go ahead and shoot. So you had Belgrano's 6-inchers putting down water spouts in front of the Lynxes. I'd like to know how that circumstance arose, actually.
Out of desperation.
I think so.
Okay, you muted, Peter.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was probably like a late night drink-ridden scenario. I'll ask Kidnap on the Discord what he meant, what happened there. I think that was all the Discord. Now I'm going to start going from top to bottom and try to pick out a few. We'll try to keep it within the hour here overall. I hope you're all are okay with that schedule.
Sure.
Let's see. This was a question for Chris. Any chance of knowing what your War College talk at Historicon will be about this year?
I'm not doing the presentation at Historicon this year. Larry is. And it's going to be on the situation in the Red Sea with the Houthi.
Okay, so then that leads very well into the next question, which is, can you discuss modern Navy issues with reliability of weapons, Falklands, Sea Darts, Moskva, and German and Danish issues in Gulf of Aden? So maybe I don't know if you want to speak very lightly to the German and Danish issues, and then tell everybody go to Historicon otherwise for the rest.
Well, the Falklands is pretty straightforward. The Sea Darts weren't sea skimmer capable. The early Sea Darts weren't, so move on. Moskva, I presented on that, and she was broke. So how do you deal with that? And the same sort of thing with the German and the Danish. They had, let's face it, they had computer problems. How many of us have had to deal with server drops and things like that? So yes, they do happen, but as Larry and I have kind of lamented before, players don't want to play a game where they're restricted by the material condition of their ship or by crew quality. They start getting snarky. So we leave that up to what the referee would like to do. And the best way to, you can deal with Moskva is, instead of a 1 or a 2 and a D10, it's a 6 or 7 when you want to shoot.
Okay,
that drops.
I'll throw out a general rule right here that anybody can use if they think they've done all the basic stuff, they know all the rules, and they want to get a little bit more hardcore. Take each major weapon system, each major sensor, and right before the shooting starts, roll D100. Now, average reliability is on the order of what, Chris? 10%? 5%?
What, drop?
Yeah,
reliability is about 85%.
Okay, 15%. If you roll 1 through 15, it's down. And fight the war that way.
That's exactly. That's the exact rule I just used in Indian intervention for
well, it's out there. It's just that players have to accept when you show up for the fight, especially if you've been at sea for a while, you might not have everything working. And there are examples of this in history where ships had to go into fight with less than 100% availability. I think a lot of people like to play Harpoon with everything working because there's so much to learn anyway. Let's start with a working system. But once you got the rules,
what I tend to GM it as is if somebody's pushing something harder than normal, I would not only introduce it, but I might even up it if they're hauling ass at 24, 25 knots, your top speeds for something, then there's a reliability issue. That's what I tend to do.
Now, there's also situations where maybe you're battle damaged. We've got Sink Kiev in high tide, which is we've got a page which shows all the battle damage that the Russians have suffered. And take the jump start, where you've got
the jump start. I was going to say,
the ship's been damaged, and the other ship's trying to guard. A somewhat less damaged ship is trying to guard it, and they have to get out. That's I see nothing wrong with those kinds of scenarios, although it's imposed on the player. So, okay, no choice. I'm fighting with a less than perfect vessel. But if you really think you've got the stones for it, and of course both sides have to roll, and then you get fancy after that. Well, you got your new systems that don't break down very often. Then you get your old systems that break down.
I'll tell you what, new systems are probably more prone to it, at least in their first operations, right?
No, if they're inside the warranty, it's probably less than 15, but
only if you bring the designers and engineers with you, like they did in Falklands, right? All right, so I did bring up a secondary question from John Newth. I don't know if you wanted to.
Spotting ships are not targetable. They're not sending by data link. They're only sending voice. So they are queuing assets. They're telling you something is coming towards you or whatnot. Unmanned aircraft, as long as you've got a real-time data link and you do with control, you would assume, they can provide real-time targeting as long as it's within range of its radio and it's not shot down. Here's the point that I want to make, John, is that you only hear about the attacks that got close enough. There are so many you don't hear about because they weren't even close, because they are shooting on crap for solutions. So the news coverage is grotesquely biased towards those weapons that got close or relatively close, that forced a ship to respond. But there's a lot of them where USNI has USNI News kept. I don't know if they're still doing it. They kept a running log of what was going on in the Red Sea, and you see a lot of things in there where a ballistic missile didn't land anywhere near the target because they fired on crap data, and these are EOS sensors with a limited field of view, and you have limited reaction time. And oh, by the way, and you're unpowered at this point, except by gravity. So I would say you need to make any unmanned air vehicle. It's not a great solution. Let's call it maybe fair. And here's the big thing. The transfer of the fire control data from the drone guys to the missile guys, from what we can tell, is by voice, which means they're always firing late. So the best you can hope for is a fair solution with this arrangement. The only way you get good is when you have a data link direct from the sensor to the shooter. That's the whole concept behind network-centric warfare.
This was a quick question from Blue Side. He just wanted a little bit more information on that Royal Navy radar book.
All right, I can post that on the. I mean, I can run around and get it, but
that's okay. That's fine. Hold on. Okay, here's a question from Martin Kelly. Have you considered terrain clutter for subs if a submarine is sitting in deep water within a few nautical miles of continental shelf?
If you're in deep water, there is no clutter. Okay. I mean, if you look at what the definition of deep is. But that's why we have that modifier for MF, HF, LMF, all the sonar. That modifier for active in shallow water is for reverberation, and it's not just clutter on the bottom; it's bottom bounce that bounces off the surface because you get a number of jiggles on that. So that is there. Once you get into deep water, it's volume reverb, it's critters, it's currents. Eddies, that sort of thing. Because now you got water with Doppler, and that kind of sends back a return. It's weak, and people are going to find it as a spurious contact. So that gets more into false alarms than anything else. But we do have values in the active sonar table for high reverberation environments.
Here's a quick question, or at least suggestion. Japanese floating mines were a thing in the Russo-Japanese in World War I. Need some rules.
I think those are there.
Okay.
Here's the problem with the floating mines. They're not a formal field. Because they're drifting, and the Russo-Japanese war ones, we even talk about they've got rope or chains between them. So I think those are there. The chances of a hit are not great. That's one of the reasons why drifting mines were really not embraced. The only time you saw them used by the Japanese is when someone was chasing them. and then they would stick them out there. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think we talk about what the mine density is. I'll have to go look, but it's relatively low. I do know we talk about the mines that are stringed together.
As far as I can tell, I have covered all of the questions from Discord and from YouTube.
Well, let me deal with the one that I saw. Martin talked about how do you define shipping intensity in terms of for sonar background noise. We've got it down to we have it down to 2. I'm going to be adjusting it to 3 various because the heavy needs to be a little louder. But basically, when you look at heavy background shipping noise, you're talking close to a coast. So let's say about 100 miles off a coast. It's in particular if you're near a harbor, it's going to be heavy. You're going to have lots of fishing traffic. You're going to have lots of coastal merchants. You're going to have transoceanic merchants coming in. So within 100 miles, it's just going to be loud. Lots of background. Within a country's EEZ, which is 200 miles past the territorial limit, it thins out quite a bit, but you're still going to have what I would call moderate levels. The thing to be aware of is that shipping intensity only affects VLF and LF sonars. The LF, you do have to make sure that ambient, sea state and other type noise versus shipping noise, and whichever is louder is the one you use because the curves overlap at that point.
Okay, one last thing. I was gonna plug your rangefinder potential rebuttal, right? Not rebuttal, but
well, no, it's more of an explanation.
Editorial.
Because the author uses that old misconception that base length of a rangefinder is all that matters, when in fact magnification has the bigger influence on rangefinder error performance.
So yeah, so I think USNI proceedings and naval history you're able to view. I think it's 4 a month for free. I do
5 a month.
Yeah, I will absolutely 1000% recommend you get a subscription to USNI. That's probably been one of the most cost-effective things I've done in my life, really, honestly, because there's so much material you get. And no, they're not paying me to say this. It's very good. The Marine Corps Gazette is also very good. So if you can get both, that's what I have. You have a really good plethora of articles and a good wide breadth of potential professional wargaming material.
And the other thing, Peter, is that USNI has scanned or at least transported over a lot of the older proceedings. As a member, you can then go search for articles that you obviously don't have, because I've pulled up articles from the 1890s.
Yeah, it's a great group, and they're doing good things, I think. So I'll give them a free plug there. Unless you have any last minute topics, I think we'll try to get another one of these going in about a month-ish, 2 months. We kind of average 2 months, I think. But definitely if a product is about to come out, we might do like a quick shorter one or something just to kind of show everybody what it's all about. But until we talk again, very good conversation as always. And
Peter, what we can probably do is after Historicon, Larry can do a reprise of his Houthi presentation for the Discord channel. which we've gotten into the habit of doing anyway. And for those that can't make the convention, and of course, we'll then, the presentation slides will be up on the website anyway.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very much look forward to that. All right, everybody. Thank you, audience, for all the questions. Thank you, Discord community, for all your questions, and great products. Just keep them coming. Easier said than done sometimes. Have a good one.
Yep. Thank you.
Happy Memorial Day, everyone. Take care.